everybody. Welcome to Better Love and Sex. I am your host, Devi Ward, and I thank you for tuning in and joining us once again for another juicy conversation exploring ways for you and me and all of us to awaken, heal, and transform our sexuality so that we can have more love and better sex in our lives. Because let me tell you, there is no point in having crappy sex. I will tell you that. So we may as well find out how to have the best sex ever, because it's absolutely awesome for our mind, body, and spirit. Moving right along, this evening we have Miss Spencer Jones. Is that right, Spencer?
Yes, it is.
So I get confused because on Facebook her alias is Greta Garbo. So I always think of her in my head as Greta Garbo, but her name is really Spencer Jones. And she is a female erotica writer, and she specializes in bisexual female erotica. And were you born in England? Were you born in London?
Actually, I was born in New York City, but I spent a lot of time in Europe, particularly England. And I went to school in Wales. And you went to, we were talking about this before, Aberystwyth, right? Very good. That's better than my dad.
Aberystwyth University in Wales, where she earned her master's degree in creative writing. Wow, a master's in creative writing. And prior to that, she took an intensive writing program at Oxford. So you're an Oxford girl, too.
I am.
She is a staunch believer that sex should be celebrated, and writing is her way of doing just that. Some of her work is rooted in personal experience, but she's found a special niche in the world of vintage erotica. Her first published work, Regrettable Circumstances, is set just after World War II and appears in the anthology Twice the Pleasure Bisexual Women's Erotica. Thank you so much, Spencer Jones, for being here to discuss this.
No problem. This is pretty awesome for me.
Right on. So I'm curious, I want to get all up in your personal life. Why did you spend so much time in England?
Well, actually, my mother is one of 10, and about, I'd say, 6 of her siblings moved to England. So I have an enormous amount of cousins and so forth. I've been spending summers there since I was a little kid. And I first went to Oxford in 2007, fell in love with it, met the creator of the creative writing department at Aberystwyth while at Oxford, and that's how I found out about that university, and that's where I did my master's.
Oh, so do you find that affects your writing? Because you're like, you live in the U.S., but then you have this European debonair perspective as well. Do you find that affects your writing?
Oh, I definitely think that my international experience impacts my writing enormously. Being able to meet people from all walks of life, from different cultures, speaking different languages. And sometimes I may not even be aware of the fact that I've been inspired by, another country or another person. It just kind of slips in there. Wow, interesting word choice, huh?
Yeah. Slips on in there. Lots of lubrication for your mind.
Exactly. So I'm very grateful that I've had that opportunity over the years.
So I'm curious. So we're talking about erotica, but specifically bisexual erotica. So what is your perception of bisexuality? What is that about for you?
I think bisexuality, its most basic definition would be someone who's attracted to men and women. But I think there are further categories beyond that. You have people who are attracted to men and women just in the sexual sense. You have people who are attracted to one sexually and but would not consider a romantic relationship with that person. As for myself, I'm attracted to men and women sexually, but I've only dated women. Not because I don't want to date men, it's just that's the way fate has kind of worked out for me. But I'm very happy to be bisexual because, I can appreciate men and women, and that, makes itself apparent in my work, my drawing, and certainly in my writing.
That's interesting because I actually haven't met many bisexual women who have only dated women. Usually the bisexual women that I encounter are, they mostly have dated men and then occasionally a woman, that sort of thing. But I haven't met a bisexual woman who identifies as bisexual but hasn't ever dated a man as well.
Right. I mean, it's just kind of the way things worked out. I haven't really found that dashing, debonair dude as yet. So, and I'm certainly open to it. It just hasn't happened.
That's awesome. So I myself, you were wondering if I'm bisexual. Absolutely, I'm bisexual. I've actually been I've had intimate relationships with men and women most of my life. I've mostly been with men, and I've been having an intimate relationship with a woman for the past year. And but I find for myself that I really like the nourishment of both male and female energy in my life at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Society kind of pushes us to choose one way or the other, but they don't realize that asking someone to choose between one and the other is like telling a straight person, no, you have to choose your own sex, or vice versa. It can't be chosen.
Yeah, it just is, and for me, like sexual, not even just sexual energy. I say energy is food, and energy can be medicinal, and especially sexual energy. And I find that often, I'm engaged with my female partner, and I also need the sexual medicinal energy of a male counterpart as well.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so I guess, yeah, yay. So that's bisexuality for all of us. And just so you know, just so everybody's clear what the definition is and our approach to it. So given that fact, what made you interested in writing erotica specifically?
Well, I was writing erotica long before I had any sexual experience to speak of. So we're talking maybe age 12 or 13. If you read some of my work, you would see a lot of character kissing and so forth, maybe a bit of making out, nothing really beyond that. It wasn't until I hit maybe my late teens, 17, 18, that you start seeing sort of actual sex taking place.
Wait, I have a question. Is that because you started having sex?
Yes, because
okay,
I think I think the stuff that I was writing when I was, maybe 13, 14, it's very idealized. When you haven't had it, you think, oh, it's this great thing, and I can't wait to try it. Well, I was a late bloomer. I didn't actually have sex until I was 21. Mm-hmm. I'm 26.
Wow.
It's just, yeah, exactly. So that kind of shocks a lot of people, seeing how candid I am on social media and in person. But, I just decided to write it because I thought it would be a healthy and a safe outlet for me. And I've seen my own improvement, I think, over the years, with my confidence in writing about these things and so forth, and sharing them with other people. And I'm thrilled that I got published. So
that's very exciting. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yay! It's great to have stuff published. So I'm curious for you. So then what is it? What is there's a lot of, I've read a lot of lesbian erotica and I've read a lot of heterosexual erotica, right? Mm-hmm. So what is it specifically about bisexual erotica? What's the difference for you in that? I mean, aside from the obvious, there's going to be men and women, but writing about it, it's like when you're writing about sex with women, is it different for you than writing about sex with men?
Oh, absolutely. I think they give off totally different kinds of energy. In the story that was published, Regrettable Circumstances, technically there is no actual male involvement. It is a sexual situation between three women, so lesbian threesome. But there is a bit of the sort of masculine energy. One of the characters has attributes that society, I guess, would consider to be more masculine. She's very demanding. She's very, you got to get down and do what I say at this time and so forth. So I guess that's how I sort of weaved masculine energy into a lesbian situation, if you will. So.
So they're in that story, there aren't any men that make an appearance?
No, not in the sex scene, no. I mean, the whole event takes place at a party, so there are male characters, but they don't really play a seminal role in the actual sex. So.
Yeah, I caught that too. When I published my book, Shake Your Soul Song, someone wrote a review and she said that it wasn't seminal, and I was like, what do you mean? There's no sperm in it? What do you mean? I mean, I knew that, but I'm like, what the heck does that mean? So I'd actually go look it up. It's an interesting phrase, isn't it?
It is. It's applicable in so many ways, right?
So then, do you do writing when with the male characters making a sexual appearance?
Sure, I have, absolutely. Not in this particular story, but I do have other stories that I have completed that I intend to submit for possible publication that do involve men, yes.
And do you think, so I'm curious, do you think that that's a growing niche market, or a necessary, I guess, a necessary service that you provide? Because there's a lot of us women out there who are bisexual, and it seems like our choices aren't very, we can have straight erotica or lesbian erotica, but there isn't a whole lot of mix in the two.
Well, you'd probably find, being bisexual as well, that we are considered sort of the fence straddlers. We are condemned by the straights and the gays as not being straight enough or not being gay enough. We tend to operate in binaries anyway, black and white,
yes,
right and left. There's no in-between. It's as if we don't exist. So I'm very happy to be able to sort of dismantle that whole ridiculous notion that bisexuality is just a phase, that's just someone being on their way to being totally gay, which is ridiculous, and I'm happy to do that with my work. So,
yeah, that bisexuality isn't actually a valid sexual expression.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
That's how it's perceived.
So, the premise of your first published story, you told us a little bit about that. Is there more that you'd like to share with us? The premise of Regrettable Circumstances?
Sure. The story takes place, as you had mentioned, just after, I believe you'd mentioned it, shortly after World War II. And there was an actress back then named Tallulah Bankhead, and she's decided to host a party. And at this party, there's a lot of sexual tension going on between her and these two other actresses, Marlene Dietrich and Greta Garbo. The story is told by Greta Garbo, and I kind of punned on her name for the title. And without giving too much away, there's a lust triangle between the three of them, a lot of unresolved issues, and, and I sort of explore what those issues are, how they came into play, and so forth. And it goes beyond just the sex. I mean, the sex is just sort of, one aspect of it, but there's a lot of other stuff going on.
Absolutely. So is this work, it has already been published, or it's in the process of being published?
It has been published. It was published, I believe, in April of this year.
Oh, that's
April,
so
May.
exciting.
Yeah.
So exciting. So I want to know where to get one. We're going to tell you at the end of the show, too, but can you tell us right now, before we go to break, where someone can pick up? It's Twice the Pleasure Bisexual Women's Erotica. Is that right?
Sure, yes. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Barnes & Noble, either the store or online. Pretty much all the major booksellers, you'll find it.
I can't wait to read more of your stories, Spencer.
Hey.
So how do you go about writing a story? Is there a special process that you do?
Well, it actually kind of varies. Sometimes really just reading other works of writing that may not necessarily be sexual can trigger something. I've worked in my own experiences and sort of idealized them a bit. Where they weren't so fabulous, I've made them fabulous. I was
going to say, do you go do research?
Yeah, oh, sure, of course. Absolutely do research.
I'm researching for a book. Let's have sex.
Yeah, exactly. Let's try this, exactly. And, a lot of my characters are, classic Hollywood actresses. So even, I could pop in a movie with Marlene Dietrich and, and that may trigger something. So it really depends. And sometimes I may not start from the beginning of the story. I may start in the middle or even at the end and work my way back.
Right, that's very cool. Yeah, so it's like just part of the story, and then the rest of it kind of crystallizes and comes to life around that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right on. So when you look at the work that you're doing now compared to before, I mean, we touched on this before you were having sex, like especially now that I'm guessing you have you're an adult now, you're having an enriching sex life. What are some of the differences?
Oh, wow. Well, when you haven't had it, you have these expectations. Society likes to tell us, oh, sex is this great thing. And man,
but it is.
But it is, absolutely. It is. But, I think we have a lot of build-up, and we find that sometimes, the actual experience falls short. So, as I said, when I was writing it before I had any sexual experience to speak of with men or women, it was very idealized, and when I had it, it was a little more down to earth.
Right.
For example, here's an example I can think off the top of my head. I once had a character, it was a heterosexual relationship, and they kept having sex, and he kept ejaculating over and over again because I'd never heard of the term refractory period.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Mm-hmm.
So once I've had it, it's like, okay, the guy needs to breathe. After like 1 or 2 shots, he needs to breathe.
Usually after one, but I have to say I did have a boyfriend when I was 19 that, like, it was like, probably like the dude in your book, and I was like, good God.
There are always
19,
exceptions. Right. But I was having it like 5 or 6 times, and I read that story today. I'm like, you are you kidding? Like, you got to be kidding.
It can happen, though. Remember, it's a story.
Right. So I'll excuse it because it was fiction, but,
Right. Well, so I hear that. So it's like, definitely when especially growing up in the Walt Disney culture, right? So we have this romanticized, idealized, like, oh, Prince Charming is going to kiss us and it's going to be flowers and butterflies. But the actual work of sex, the actual hands-on experience of sex is amazing, but it can also be terrifying and scary and, and noisy and stinky and weird sometimes.
Sure. And there can be consequences for having sex. Health consequences, emotional attachments, and so forth that you don't anticipate, really.
Exactly, especially when you're 12 and 13.
Exactly. That's why I said, let me chill until I'm in my late teens, early 20s. I was a late bloomer compared to at least some of my friends, so, I'm glad that I waited.
So did you live vicariously through them and use some of their stories in your writing?
Oh, sure. Some of them come back to me and say, oh, I did this, and it was awesome, and whatever, So I would take some of that and sort of weave it into my own story. Yeah, absolutely. My friends have been very instrumental in that.
So it sounds like now that you're actually with the rest of us having sex, that when you write about it, it's more realistic for you, and for us as readers, it would be more realistic.
Sure, because I've had the experience, and I mean, a person can only describe things so well; it can only be so tangible. You really have to get out there and experience it because it may be very different for you.
Yes.
For the whole experience may be totally different.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of doing.
Absolutely.
Talking's great, the intellectual understanding is great, but we actually have to get we need the lab work. We have
Absolutely.
to get our hands dirty.
That's right. So
what is the distinction between writing erotica and just porn?
Well, I think that they have two very different objectives. Erotica, certainly in the erotica I've read and the erotica that I've written, let's say you have 2 characters, you have Amy and you have Jake. They have sex. Obviously, that's a big part of it. But erotica will explore what led them to have sex. How did they meet? Where did the attraction come from? And it would also explore what happens after the sex. Does Amy start catching feelings? Does Jake start catching feelings? Pornography, by and large, is not concerned with this. There really isn't much of a story. It tends to be very predictable. Really just being titillated and getting off is the objective of pornography. So I have nothing against pornographic writing or pornography in general. I think it has its place in society, absolutely. But I think it serves a very different purpose than erotica does.
Yeah, so it sounds like erotica is more of the humanity and the human interest, the emotions, it's actually more sensual writing, right?
Sure, absolutely. It's involved with the emotions and so forth. Again, pornography is just like, no, that's not the point, so.
Right, I remember when I was like 9 or 10, and we came across a Hustler or something somewhere, and there was some writing in it, and I was just, I'm guessing that pornographic writing can't be very long, if it's just about the dirty. I mean, these were, or doing the deed. I don't want to say the dirty, doing the deed. The stories that I read were like little, there were a few paragraphs, and they were just very short and to the point about, the actual in and out of it.
Literally, consider the publication as well. I mean, Hustler, Playboy, right, and so forth. I mean, they're not really concerned about the emotions and so forth. It's really just the act itself.
Right. So in pornographic writing, is it very, are there books that are like a big pornographic story, or what have you come across that?
Sorry, could you say that one more time?
Well, I'm wondering, okay, so erotica is a story. It's a story with development and character development. So I'm wondering about pornographic writing. Are there actually books of pornographic writing, or is it just like short stories and, a few phrases and paragraphs?
I'm sure they exist. I haven't personally come across them yet, because even the hardcore sexual stories that I have read, where sex is a huge component, there's still, some exploration of the emotions and so forth. But I know that stuff exists. I just haven't really gotten my hands on it. Mm-hmm. Because I like a story. So.
Yes. Yeah. And do you think that erotica appeals more to women or to men, or both? Or I guess what I'm asking, I mean, obviously there are going to be some men it appeals to, but do you think that it's predominantly that it appeals to women?
I think by and large it does appeal to women. I don't want to, knock my male friends. I know several very intelligent men that would have no problem reading erotica and discussing it in an intellectual way beyond, oh my God, she has great breasts. Yeah, okay, that's great, but what about the intellectual side of it? But I think, by and large, you look at, like, say, 50 Shades of Grey. Most of the people who were reading 50 Shades were female. Housewives or teenagers, female teenagers. Our brains just kind of operate differently, I guess.
Yeah, well, and that's actually been scientifically verified that our brains operate differently in regards to sex, and that for women we do need more sensual stimulation and and touch and sensuality and low lights and all that stuff that reading erotica would kind of invoke within us.
Satisfy, absolutely.
Yes, the emotional satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you mentioned 50 Shades of Grey. What do you think about 50 Shades of Grey? Do you think that was like a good thing to happen for American culture, or?
Well, I certainly think that it woke us up a bit, sort of took sex and the BDSM lifestyle out of the dungeon, so to speak, and brought it up into the light. So you had people on the streets talking about BDSM, and you look at them and they're like, what? Like, I wouldn't expect to hear that coming out of your mouth, I mean, there's been a lot of debate about the quality of the writing. I got as far as maybe halfway through the third book, and my opinion's rather mixed. I think some parts were well written, and other parts were not so well written. I know some of the complaints some people had that were actually part of the BDSM scene was that it was not an accurate portrayal, that there may have been a bit of abuse going on between Christian and Anastasia. I don't know too much about BDSM, so I can't comment on that front. But the one thing I will credit E.L. James for doing is that she basically got Americans talking about sex.
Amen,
and I think,
sister.
Talking about it is certainly important.
Absolutely. So it's like she brought the shadow of sex out into the light. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's how we educate. We communicate, we express ourselves, rather than keeping it as this hush-hush thing. Don't ask me about it, So I'm grateful that she did that. And I know there were a lot of, it spawned quite a few spin-offs that I have read as well that also sort of dealt with BDSM and so forth. So I'm happy that she did that.
So it sounds like it kind of like opened a doorway for other writers like yourself to be more in the public eye and more accepted by mainstream culture.
Exactly.
Yeah, right on. So in your writing, do you find it more enjoyable to write about heterosexual sex or lesbian sex?
Both have their pluses. I think swinging both ways, I can't really say one is better than the other. They both are fantastic. I think a woman tends to be more in tune with, what a woman likes by virtue of having the same body parts, and I would say the same for guys. But a guy can learn. Just patient with him. So they both have their merits, and they're both great, so...
That's interesting because I think that's a common misconception. I would not say that all women are more in tune with what a woman likes because she has the same body parts. That has not been my experience at all. Not at all.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say for myself, Kira always calls this she says it's a too much information show because I much about my own sex life. But I am going to say for me, because I've had more practice having sex with men, I actually find it easier. I have more like intellectual, like, okay, am I doing this right? I hope she likes this. I have more of my intellect involved when I'm having sex with a woman, because I'm not as familiar with the moves, because when I'm giving pleasure, I've just more often done it. My wiring has been giving to men. So
Right.
I find there's more of a thought process in giving to women.
Right. It varies for all of us, really. But as I said, they're both great. They both have, present their own challenges and so forth. Obviously, sleeping with women aren't really the same risks. There are some risks, but, pregnancy for one thing. Hey, I don't have to worry about that,
Yeah, so we don't have to talk about so in your bisexual erotica, when it's two women, there's not talking about putting a condom on.
Right, exactly. So,
yes,
hey.
That kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like comparing apples to oranges. Exactly.
Right?
I
don't really think the comparisons are really necessary. You just go into it and enjoy it, and that's it. Be safe.
Yeah, be safe and enjoy. And communicate.
Yes, please communicate.
Please talk. We need to know.
Exactly.
What's working?
Right. Please tell me what's working, So.
So given this, okay, so this is something I'm curious about. So would you consider writing gay men? And if so, how would you do the research for that?
Oh, well, I have several very, very dear gay friends of different ages. Some in my age bracket, some significantly older. For obvious reasons, I would have to turn to somebody else to really, let me know what's up with that. I have some images in my head, obviously, of what guys do, and I have an idea of what they do, but I would rather actually sit down and talk to one of my gay or bisexual male friends and have them tell me, okay, what's it like? I don't have, your body parts. You got to kind of fill me in. Wow, okay. Again, these are really great word choices. Fill me in.
Yeah, fill me in. Fill me up with knowledge.
Exactly. So, I would absolutely entertain it. I'm just not sure how authentic or genuine it would be. Because, again, I can't speak on that front. I can only speak through the experiences of others.
Right, yeah, so that would be an interesting project, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But for now, I'm enjoying having, using actual characters, who were real people at one point in most of my stories. So so your focus mostly on classic Hollywood, what genre, what age, like in the 30s, 40s, 50s, is that kind of? Yes, between the 30s and the 50s.
Between the 30s and the 50s. So that classic Hollywood, like when Hollywood was just a rising star, right?
Exactly. I gravitate towards 6 women in particular that I think were just well ahead of their time. In Regrettable Circumstances, you see 3 of them, Marlene Dietrich, Tallulah Bankhead, and Greta Garbo. There's also Betty Davis and Barbara Stanwyck. They were all phenomenal. So I work them into quite a few of my stories. In fact, I'm working on a story right now between Barbara Stanwyck and Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford would be the 6th one. Very ahead of their time, not afraid to speak out and push for what they wanted. And, they had society against them. It was a very male-dominated industry. To this day, it's still very male-dominated. So, and all of them, with the exception of Betty Davis, were alleged to have swung both ways. So
that's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask if there's any truth to the concept and the idea that they were bisexual.
Well, right. What I did with, in the instance of the story that I'm writing now between Barbara Stanwyck and Joan Crawford, is that there is an anecdote that says that at one point Barbara and Joan were neighbors in Brentwood, California, and Barbara unfortunately was trapped in an abusive marriage. And in order to escape the man, she would literally scale the fence between her property and Joan's property and go over to Joan's house. And according to one of Barbara's very close friends, one thing sort of led to the other. So I took that and I ran with it. Obviously, there are certain things I can't possibly know. I can't know, what positions did they try? Did they use any toys? Well, that's where the imagination comes in. That's where the fiction comes in. So, but at least I had a framework. I wasn't, entirely making up the whole thing.
So it's kind of like historical erotic fiction.
I guess you could call it that, yes.
Yeah, because I love historical fiction, and that's exactly what they do. It's like there's an event that occurs, but you just have in your head, okay, so and so went over to so and so's house, and one thing led to another. But that doesn't, as for us, it doesn't really, whatever. We don't really know what the heck happened. So it's like you bring that circumstance that actually happened, you actually bring it to life for us as readers.
Sure. I mean, in the case with Barbara Stanwyck, she was a very private, guarded woman. So whatever we know about her sexuality, or whatever we've been told, we've kind of found out through other people. Because if she were alive today, she almost certainly would not divulge that kind of information. Someone like Tallulah Bankhead in Regrettable Circumstances, she'd tell you a whole lot more than what you wanted to hear.
Like
very
me.
Different personality. Well, I don't mind at all, but very different personality altogether.
Right on. Oh, so tell us more about these women.
Oh, wow. Well, where to start? I got into Tallulah Bankhead first. She was really ahead of her time. She would say things like, my dad warned me about men and alcohol, but he didn't say a thing about women and cocaine. Very loaded statements,
awesome.
And so it started with her, and then one after the other, I got into Dietrich and Garbo and so forth. And, the great thing about Greta Garbo, who is the protagonist in my story, is she was such an enigma. The more she wanted to be alone, the more she generated attention and interest in her life, And she and Marlene Dietrich, were alleged to have been involved at one point, so that's something I took and ran with in my story.
Okay, so I have a question here. So,
sure.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I have a question about what do you think if they were involved, two women together in Hollywood at that time? Do you think there would have been they would have been outrageous for them to have been involved? Like it would have been a horrible thing?
I think, unfortunately, Hollywood and America were not quite ready to accept homosexuality. I think there existed that double standard, certainly for two men. That would have been an enormous no-no. Women, we can kind of disguise it, perhaps the very, very close friendship, and, some people may buy into it, oh, they're just friends. Two guys can't really do that. So, Hollywood was governed by a great deal of homophobia. So when these women were involved with other women, if they were, they would have to be discreet.
Okay, so they would have had to totally keep it on the down low.
Absolutely.
Okay, right on. And so more about the rest of them.
Oh, wow, okay. Well, Barbara Stanwyck, she came from abject poverty, from Brooklyn. And she, she wasn't considered, she and Betty Davis were not considered to be glamorous beauties by the conventions of the day. So they had to really sort of hustle in other ways to get noticed, to show the studio heads that they were talented and that there's more to an actress than just your looks. So, that's what they did. They went out there and they're like, hey, I can take the workload and so forth. Whereas someone like Joan Crawford, Marlene Dietrich, and Greta Garbo, they had their looks going for them in addition to their talent.
Right. And so even Betty Davis, wasn't she that little old lady on Golden Girls?
To the best of my knowledge, no, she was never on the Golden Girls. You're talking about Sophia Estelle Getty.
Okay.
Yeah. Very similar personality, though. Very quick-witted and a bit abrupt. Yes, Betty started to become quite abrupt with age.
Right on.
Yeah, Betty Davis was actually very, very accepting of gays and lesbians. She said something along the lines of, I don't have a problem with lesbians, but to have to wake up in the morning with a pair of breasts in my face, I'd go absolutely crazy. So It really wasn't for her. Joan Crawford apparently made a pass at her that was not reciprocated. It was not taken well.
Oh, interesting. So you know all kinds of juicy backstory.
I do. I've done a lot of reading on these women, and I continue to do a lot of reading. It's, I don't want to, even with my fiction, I want to make sure I have some sort of background on the era, the food, and the kinds of music that they would have listened to. This is important. I can't say I have Barbara Stanwyck rocking out to Justin Bieber in 1935.
Right. Yeah, you want to make it realistic and tangible. It's like I said, you're bringing this story to life. You're making it accessible to us as readers.
Exactly, as accessible as I possibly can. So
what inspired you to focus on these women? Like, what drives you to do that?
Well, what happened was I was on Wikipedia in my last year of college, that's 2009, just looking up Katharine Hepburn. I was interested in her sexuality. Now, the way Wikipedia works, as you know, is when you look up one thing, you get a million links to other things. And then I saw Tallulah Bankhead, and I said, oh, interesting name. So I got into her, and I read up her bio, and I was like, wow, this woman is amazing. And then, of course, gradually I started getting interested into the other women, the other women. My girlfriend at the time was really into Marlene Dietrich, so she got me on board with her. Another friend was interested in Barbara Stanwyck. Years later, I got on board with her. So I'm part of this little community on Facebook that, admires these women, their work, their beauty, and so forth. So I'm very happy to have found these people.
Yeah, it must be very empowering for us as women and those of us who do have alternative forms of sexual expression to have you bring these characters to life, because these were such important women in American history and Hollywood history, and to I don't want to say exposing, but kind of bringing to light and bringing to life their hidden sexual orientation.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I know one of the stories that I want to write, I'm not sure if you were familiar with this, but in the 50s, Joan Crawford had a fling with Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe has... Yes.
Really? That's true?
Yes, that is true.
Oh, that's so interesting. Tell us more.
Okay, well, what happened was Marilyn Monroe, she confessed this in a meeting that she had with her therapist, and the therapist was transcribing everything, and those transcripts came in the public eye. And basically what she said was, we went back to her house feeling no pain, and we went down on each other, and Joan had an enormous orgasm. And she wanted a round two, but I told her straight out that I wasn't terribly fond of sleeping with women, and she became spiteful after that. Now, this was the 50s, so Joan was was middle age, and I would say Marilyn was probably in her 30s, I'd imagine, or late 20s, just a fresh young starlet. I think that has its own allure, actually, yes. The cross-generational thing, in addition to the fact that they were both women. So yes. That will be my next story, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we close out the show, because we're getting close, do you, asking about opinions about bisexuality, because I have my own opinions about it, do you feel that it's a kind of a natural inclination for many people? I know there's the Kinsey scale and everybody, the shades of gray and all that, but in your experience and the people that you've met in your life, do you feel that bisexuality is more common than not?
I think it is more common than it may seem to be. I think there are a lot of people who are not really keeping it real with who they are, either because of pressure from society or pressure from their families. I've been very fortunate to come from a family that was well-educated and very open-minded for the most part. So when I came out at 17, it was like Dad said, oh, I already knew, and Mom was totally cool with it as well. So it certainly helps to have that nurturing environment where I can be true to myself, mm-hmm. and that helps my art as well. I don't feel I have to do it secretly.
Right, so it doesn't matter if you bring home a man or a woman to your house.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
Not at all. Right. I'm very happy to have the kinds of parents that I do.
Yay. Yeah, and in England as well. That's wonderful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My family for the most part over there, they're also very open-minded and progressive. So, there's a world of difference between writing and feeling like, oh, well, what if my mom stumbles on this? I'm going to be grounded. Versus if my mom stumbles upon it, so what? Okay? My mom read Regrettable Circumstances, and she liked it. She said it, obviously she's straight, but she was like, oh, well, it got the job done. I can see why it would be appealing to some, Mm-hmm. That was her response, so.
So in general, they're supportive of what you do?
Absolutely. They're very supportive of my pursuits, my writing, my art, my Zumba teaching, everything.
Right on, because you're a Zumba fitness instructor as well.
I am a Zumba fitness instructor. I'm a luxury travel agent. I'm all over the place. I'm a Renaissance woman, I guess. Yeah, I like to have several things going. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I said a Jill of many trades.
Exactly. and I can still do my writing on the side. There's no conflict with my Zumba or my main job. So very happy to be able to do that.
Yay, that's beautiful. So, very lovely. So people can buy, just for those of you who want to read the writing, I'm so intrigued, Regrettable Circumstances. Tell us where to find that again, please, Spencer.
You can find it on Amazon. You can find it in Barnes & Noble. It's in Twice the Pleasure, Bisexual Women's Erotica. It's edited by Rachel Kramer Bussell, and you'll find that title listed under my legal middle name, which is Lane, Lane. So you won't find it under Spencer Jones.
Okay, that's good information to know. So everybody remember, you're going to find it under Lane, not Spencer Jones.
Exactly. And people are welcome to email me if they'd like. It's spencerjones1987@hotmail.com.
Beautiful. And so what if people want to stay connected and learn more about your upcoming works? Because I know I want to get my hot little hands on a copy when it comes out.
Well, there's always Facebook. It's a little bit difficult to find me under Greta Garbo. You type her in, you're going to get the real Greta Garbo. The best way to do it is probably to do it via your page. I don't believe you have anyone named Greta Garbo on your page. Of course, there's my email. And, I'm in the process of putting together a website and a Facebook page and so forth to kind of get the word out there. I'm still kind of new to this. That's why it's kind of dragging along. But I think Facebook via your page would be the best way to find me and my email.
Yes. And so what I will do for those of you who are interested in staying in contact with Spencer, tomorrow, Better Love and Sex, the blog post, when the show is uploaded, I will do the blog post as I do every week, and I will have links to Spencer's Facebook page so you can contact her directly as well. Is it okay if I put your email address up there too, Spencer?
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to
as well
hear
as her
people's
email
thoughts.
address.
And I'm not pretentious at all. If the people don't like it, just come out and say it. This is how I grow as a writer and a creative force. So
beautiful. Yeah, so I'm guessing there's probably a place to leave reviews for the Amazon book as well, yes?
Yes, Amazon and Barnes & Noble. There are places to leave reviews, so if you'd like to go that route, that's fine too.
Well, I read some of it, and it was hot.
You read some of Regrettable Circumstances?
No, not Regrettable Circumstances. Some of your writing that you sent me. I don't know if that was from Regrettable Circumstances or something else, but it was super hot. I loved it.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and it wasn't even sex. It was just like you described, it was the build-up. It was the emotional dynamics. It was so arousing.
I think you probably read the one with the dance teacher, right?
I'm not sure. I can't remember. It was a while back, and there were two women, and they were both married, and one was abusive.
Oh, it was Barbara Stanwyck and Joan Crawford. That's the one that you read. That's the one that's still in progress rather.
Okay, yeah. So that was really arousing, and like I said, there wasn't even I didn't even get to the sex parts. It was just the emotional dynamic and the interplay between the two was very, very, and the tension. That was sexy.
Thank you so much. Well, I agree that tension can be sexy, sort of, that I want it, but I don't know if I should because I'm married and so forth. They would have felt bound by convention.
By convention, yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, right on. Really wonderful stuff. I'm excited to read more of your work. And everybody, I really encourage you to check out Spencer Jones. Thank you so much, Spencer. It was wonderful. It was just fabulous to have you on. And like I said, I can't wait to read more of your work. I'm going to thank everybody out there listening. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us this evening for another succulent conversation about more love and better sex. Tune in next week. We have Explosive Sexual Healing. That should be a fabulous show. I can't wait to talk
Marvin Gaye coming on there then?
Jen and Ben are coming on to talk about explosive sexual healing. So we'll catch you next week. Stay tuned in and turned on in every area of life. Thank you so much and good evening.
Awesome.